We had multiple TNA injuries at the Impact tapings last night, plus WWE turned down an AJ Styles Bound for Glory appearance, and The Judgment Day have made a major indie appearance. It's all in the Cultaholic Wrestling news right now. So last night, after Bound for Glory, we had an evening of tapings of Impact, and we want to send some love to two particular TNA stars coming out of that show, being Vikingo and Chris Bay, who all seem to sustain injuries at the tapings.
Yes, Vikingo suffered what could have possibly been a leg injury during a match with Trent Seven. He seemed to land awkwardly off a corkscrew dive, and shortly after that incident, the referee threw up the X. Vikingo was taken out of the arena on a stretcher shortly afterwards, and it's particularly unfortunate because Vikingo had just recently made his in-ring return after about 7 months away, recovering from a torn meniscus and a ruptured ligament, and obviously best wishes to Vikingo, first of all. Tremendously unfortunate timing. Really
bad time, especially since he's not long come back from, as you say, from injury as well. Such an incredible talent who goes at 100 miles an hour, and sending nothing but our best wishes to him. Later in that same tape, and in fact it was the main event of the Impact taping block, it was Chris Bay teaming with Ace Austin challenging the Hardys for the TNA Tag Team title. It seems as if Chris Bay took a neck breaker and was knocked out completely from it. And onlookers say that he lay on the canvas and they finished the match very abruptly after that. And once again, Chris Bay was stretchered out. There was a lot of concern for Chris Bay because he wasn't moving for a long while and couldn't leave of his own energy, so he was stretchered out of the building. Really unfortunate for Chris Bay.
Yeah, really scary one. We're obviously all waiting for updates to hear about Chris Bay's condition. Hopefully he's doing okay. It's again one of those reminders of just how dangerous wrestling is, even things that might seem to us like the most routine of spots or anything like that. It's not necessarily just the high risk stuff that can lead to injury. And again, we just hope that Chris Bay makes a full and speedy recovery. But yeah, a tremendously unfortunate taping night there for TNA Wrestling.
So we had Bound for Glory on Saturday night, which saw Rhino and Bob Ryder inducted into the TNA Hall of Fame. And according to Fightful Select, there were two other names that were suggested as potential Hall of Famers for TNA this year.
Yes, both AJ Styles and Monty Brown were apparently both considered, according to Fightful Select. They were told that even though neither of those two ended up happening, that door isn't necessarily closed. Fightful was actually told that the possibility of inducting AJ Styles into the TNA Hall of Fame was broached with WWE, who passed on the opportunity. Fightful weren't told specifically why, but people in TNA believe that it's due to AJ's injury or active storyline, whatever the situation is going on with him in WWE. There were hopes that Styles would be open to wrestling in TNA as well, but Fightful say that they're not sure if that was ever discussed. So yeah, it seems like that night could well have featured AJ Styles, and WWE, for potential reasons there, kind of nixed it and said no, not right now.
I do wonder whether, as Fightful has said there, because of what's currently happening with AJ on television, he returned to face Carmelo Hayes, and then from what we've gleaned from that whole bit was there was meant to be a storyline injury to AJ Styles that ended up becoming a legitimate injury to AJ Styles, and potentially a career-ending one as well. But it's one that we're keeping an eye on. So whether it's a case of whilst we wait to find out what the future is for AJ Styles, they just want him off TV altogether, including other programs like TNA Bound for Glory.
Yeah.
And I think the time will come that AJ Styles goes into that Hall of Fame. I think it's a no-brainer.
He's possibly the most obvious shoe-in for the TNA Hall of Fame out of maybe anybody. So yeah, as long as TNA is a company that exists in the wrestling landscape, you have to imagine the door will always be open for AJ Styles to be inducted. He was a small part of Bound for Glory, sending in a video as part of Bob Ryder's posthumous Hall of Fame induction. That was a really emotional part of the pre-show, and a really good speech by Eric Young, who said he was a close friend of Bob Ryder's. One of those characters in wrestling who it seems like always shied away from the spotlight himself, but was a very invaluable part of TNA behind the scenes, and it just sounded like an incredibly dedicated man. It was a really emotional speech. Eric Young talked about how Bob didn't have any immediate family of his own, so he became part of Eric Young's family. They would have Thanksgiving together and that sort of thing. Really lovely moment, really good speech from Eric Young, and a very nice tribute to one of those people that we might not necessarily hear too much about, but who in the industry is incredibly respected.
You cannot tell the story of TNA without Bob Ryder. Quite simply, you cannot. So I'm glad that he was honoured at Bound for Glory over the weekend as well. We talked about a couple of injuries that were sustained during the Impact tapings. It was a tough weekend as well for a standout from over in Ireland, and she's taken over the world at large, to be fair. Session Moth Martina was part of OTT's 10th year anniversary show, and suffered a terrifying injury during her match for the OTT Women's title, a tables match against Raven Creed. Fightful's Corey Brennan was there.
Yes, he reported Raven would put Martina through a table on the stage to win the match and the OTT Women's Championship. Following the match, Martina did not get up, and the medical team on site worked on her as they checked her neck and the back of her head. Raven would celebrate her victory in the ring before briefly standing over Martina, with Martina getting to her feet with the assistance of the medical team and with a towel pressed to the back of her head. Now, unlike the injuries we've already talked about with Chris Bay and Vikingo over at the TNA tapings, we do have an update on Martina because she shared a photo from her hospital bed with her head wrapped in a bandage. She announced that she'd be missing out on her scheduled Progress match the following day, and would later reveal on Twitter that the head injury was, quote, significant, and that she'd be out of action for a little while. So again, best wishes to Session Moth Martina there.
In true Session Moth style, there she is in hospital, head bandaged up very heavily, and the caption is, "I should be in the pub."
Yeah.
We'll get you back in the pub soon, Martina, I promise you.
Yeah, if you've, I mean, I don't know how you wouldn't have by this point, but if you've never heard of Session Moth Martina, one of the biggest stars to come out of Ireland in wrestling, and also has, as you say, taken over various other scenes, the UKC and over in America as well. She's tremendously entertaining, and the sooner we can get her back in wrestling, the better.
And really was a night of those big Irish stars at OTT's 10th year anniversary. We talk about Session Moth Martina being one of those. We can't talk about big Irish stars without mentioning Finn Balor and JD McDona, who returned to OTT. The Judgment Day making a rare indie appearance as Balor and McDona returned to their roots at the National Stadium in Dublin for OTT's 10th year anniversary show.
Yes, and not only that, but they won, defeating the Social Elite in the main event of the night in front of a big crowd of 2,200 fans. Both Balor and McDonough shared photos from the night on their socials thanking OTT in what I imagine was, now that they've moved on to WWE and they're no longer part of that scene as regularly, it must have been an emotional experience for them.
Oh, you could imagine so. I mean, more recently, Jordan Devlin, as he was a big part of OTT's main picture pre-pandemic. Obviously, you know, the story of Prince Devitt doesn't get told without the Irish wrestling landscape around him before he moved on to Japan. So this felt like a big homecoming. They got a major reaction from the crowd. There's a lovely bit where they're walking to the ring, which they've shared online, and they're all singing the Judgment Day's theme, which is a really lovely work. A great show by OTT. That also featured Jack's former charge, Big Damo, in action against Rene Dupree.
Yeah, I managed him, I think, in 2 matches.
Hey, that's 2 more matches than everybody else.
And in the second one, he punched me in the face, which explains why maybe too many people aren't that keen on managing Big Damo anymore. You can't trust him.
That's the one thing that you learned from managing Big Damo. You cannot trust him.
Can't take your eyes off him.
We also saw Charlie Sterling become the first ever OTT European champion in a match that featured my boy Grado.
Hey, fantastic.
2,200 people singing Madonna. It was a lovely time had by all. And for the latest wrestling news throughout the day, at any time, of course, you can check out Cultaholic.com. Stay safe. Love you. Bye.